And pardon me, and welcome back. My name is Don K. Preston. This is Morning Musings, and I appreciate you being with me very, very much as I'm sharing a good cup of coffee with you this morning, sharing some thoughts from the Word of God. And we're just currently discussing the already but the not yet, pardon me, of the eschatology of the Bible. Jesus and his apostles and the writers of the New Testament spoke of the eschatological elements as if they were already completed. And then they would turn around and say that those things were yet to be completed. And in our last segment, we noticed how salvation is one of those things that was said to be a reality, Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, for by grace have you been saved. But it was an ongoing process. 1 Peter chapter 1, Peter uses the present active indicative to speak of what was taking place. And then the writer of Hebrews, speaking of Christ's second coming, said he would appear a second time apart from sin for salvation. You know, it's really interesting to me that people try to dichotomize and create two different kinds of salvation. They say, well, you know, we're saved spiritually now. We will be saved physically at the end of the age. And there is no such dichotomy in the Bible. This is a theological fabrication. And number one, it violates the way that God has invariably operated. For instance, under the Old Covenant, God had animal sacrifices. For instance, the Passover. The Passover was a physical animal sacrifice, and it pointed forward to the better, greater spiritual sacrifice of Jesus. They had a physical temple. That physical temple was a typological foreshadowing of the spiritual temple of Christ. They had a physical bloodline priesthood that foreshadowed the coming spiritual priesthood of all believers. We could go on and on. The point of fact is that God has always operated, first of all, from the natural, what is known as the natural, and the Greek word that is used, for instance, 1 Corinthians 15:46, really doesn't focus on physical per se. It has to do with more lifestyle, man opposed to God, etc., etc. But nonetheless, that being true, it is also true that God has operated from the natural, the carnal, and the physical that pointed forward to the spiritual. So those who say, well, we currently have, you know, the spiritual that's pointing to the physical are in violation of the way that God has always operated, and there's no justification for that. A second point that I want to emphasize this morning in regard to this already salvation, the not yet of salvation, and by the way, some folks on my Facebook page, you know, they offered some objections, and they 100% ignored this aspect of it. And that is that in the New Testament, whereas we have statements of the already, then we have statements of the not yet, and the not yet is always in an imminent context. Now, I pointed this out in my previous segment in Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 28. And now to those who eagerly look for him, he shall appear a second time, apart from sin, for salvation. And I pointed out that the writer continues to discuss that coming of the Lord for salvation. And in Hebrews chapter 10, 35 to 39, the writer encourages them to patience. You have need of patience so that you might receive the great reward. Well, what's the great reward? It's the salvation to come at the day of the Lord. Now watch. For, this is a connective particle, for in a very, very little while. The Greek of the text is hosan mikron. How very, very little while the one who's coming will come and will not tarry. Now, those who say that we're still waiting for the salvation of Hebrews 9:28 have a really severe problem here. The writer of Hebrews said, speaking of the coming of the Lord for salvation. No matter, and by the way, it doesn't matter your concept of the salvation in this context. Really doesn't matter. The writer of Hebrews said, in a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. Now, folks, I don't care how you want to slice it or dice it. A 2,000-year wait is a delay. It's a long time. So, when we talk about the already but the not yet of salvation, if we're going to be good students of the Word, we have to acknowledge and we have to submit to the Word. When we read on the pages of the Bible, they were waiting for salvation. By the way, in Hebrews 9:28, to those who eagerly look for Him, the Greek word that is used there is very powerful, indicating the expectation of the imminent fulfillment. There is no long, protracted delay here. They were expecting the coming of the Lord for salvation in their lifetime, and then again in Hebrews 10, and now in a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come, and He will not delay. Simply no way out of it. So let me reiterate. When the New Testament writers spoke of the current reality, or the current element, whatever it be, redemption, salvation, adoption, etc., and spoke of it as a present reality, and then they spoke of the not yet of it, they almost invariably spoke of it as coming very, very soon. It is absolutely improper, hermeneutically, exegetically, to ignore, to distort, and to pervert the expectation of the New Testament writers in regard to when they expected the consummation of the already that had begun, which they expected to be fulfilled very, very soon. You know what? I've got more on this in my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. Go to my website, www.eschatology.org, BibleProphecy.com. Order the book. Remind me that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook. I'll refund your shipping. It's a great offer. Saves you almost $5. Get the book. Read all of this material. Study it carefully. You'll be amazed at how clear the message of the New Testament is in regard to the already, but the very imminent, not yet. Thanks again for joining me. We'll see you on the flip side.